After weeks of speculation that Keir Starmer could be replaced by a Labour rival, this was the party leader's attempt to answer persistent criticism that no one's sure what he stands for. He defined himself as the opposite of Nigel Farage, with views that enshrined the true values of this country.
Britain stands at a fork in the road. We can choose decency or we can choose division, renewal or decline. A country proud of its values, in control of its future, or one that succumbs against the grain of our history to the politics of grievance. It is a test, a fight for the soul of our country.
Keir Starmer took special aim at reforms policy to revoke leave to remain that's already been granted to people living in Britain.
Our neighbours, if you say they should now be deported, then mark my words, we will fight you with everything we have, because you are the enemy of national renewal.
He briefly acknowledged that his approach would mean policies unpopular with some Labour supporters, but radical or populist policies to the left and right of him were the road to ruin.
All you need to do is listen to politicians who tell you there's a quick fix, a miracle cure, tax cuts that magically pay for themselves, a wealth tax that somehow solves every problem. The Brexit lies on the side of that bus. Click here for your new country. We can all see these snake oil merchants on the right, on the left, but be in no doubt conference, none of them have any interest in national renewal, because decline is good for their business.
A wealth tax, which was actually backed in a conference vote yesterday, shoehorned into a list of Nigel Farage policies. Keir Starmer attacked the reform leader with a vigour many in his party had grown impatient to hear.
He doesn't like Britain, doesn't believe in Britain, wants you to doubt it just as much as he does. I have had enough of lectures from self-appointed champions of working people who want to shred our public service, level down workers' rights, crash the economy like Liz Truss. Politicians who lied to this country, unleashed chaos and walked away after Brexit, who equivocate on Putin and Ukraine, who even now go to America and grub around for money, talking this great country down. No. No more lectures from them. And the question I ask seriously of Nigel Farage and Reform is, do they love our country? Do they want to serve our country, all of it, our beautiful, tolerant, diverse country, every region, nation and city? Or do they just want to stir the pot of division because that works in their interests?
He warned a party in which some are already weary 15 months into power that there was more they wouldn't like still to come.
It doesn't get easier from here. And the tough decisions, they will keep on coming.
He hinted that the budget might lift the two-child benefit cap. And he said the aim of 50% of youngsters going to university disrespected those who took up apprenticeships instead.
So, conference, today I can announce we will scrap that target and replace it with a new ambition that 2/3 of our children should go either to university or take a gold standard apprenticeship.
Flags were distributed to all. Keir Starmer was trying to flourish Labour's patriotic credentials.
So let's fly all our flags, conference, because they're our flags. They belong to all of us, and we will never surrender them. With resolve, with respect, with the flag in our hands, we will renew this country until we can say with total conviction that Britain is built for all. Thank you, conference. Thank you.
For all the frenzy in the hall, some MPs said they thought this speech would buy Keir Starmer some time, but maybe not much. He's survived what some thought could have been a fateful week, and he hopes shown a passion for sticking around.
And Gary's with me now. Did he do enough?
The MPs I've been talking to feel that in terms of the attacks on Nigel Farage, they quite liked that element of the speech, and it was a huge chunk of the speech, and it went down very well in the hall, and he was trying to show that Keir Starmer can put a shape on Nigel Farage. He could take him on. He wasn't actually probably auditioning for the TV debates in the next general election, but Labour MPs need to have a sense in their mind that he could actually stand there behind a podium and take on Nigel Farage. Well, that might be a rather sticky encounter if we ever got there, but he also was showing that he has fire in the belly. He really passionately wants this job. Talk to people who've known Keir Starmer for years, and they say he wears his confidence on his sleeve, and when it's been hit, and it has been hit recently, he can seem sunken. It's like the air's gone out of him. Up there, he looked like a man who, come and take me on if you really think you can. A man who really wanted to hang around. As for the policies he was trying to outline, or the shape of his policies, well, quite a lot of Labour MPs still think he's a bit shape-shifting, and they're not really sure that the man who was talking about Island of Strangers really quite recently is quite the same man who was standing there. They prefer this one, quite a lot of them, but they wonder on all the policy areas that he talked about, how good is he for the journey on those things? So has he done enough? I spoke to a couple of MPs. One said, oh, well, this will allow us to coast along for a while. Another one, a minister, said he was never going to change the mood amongst the MPs, and he hasn't. One cabinet minister described the mood amongst MPs to me as sulphurous.
Well, joining me now is the Foreign Secretary, Yvette Cooper. Let's start with Gaza, and we'll also talk about the Prime Minister's speech. I mean, we heard the Prime Minister say you're behind the Trump plan, but are you worried it's unravelling as we speak? Netanyahu's gone back to Israel, and he's saying, while Hamas are deliberating what to do, he is opposed to a Palestinian state, and Israeli troops will not withdraw from most of the territory. I mean, it's falling apart.
We do strongly support this US peace initiative. It's incredibly important because we need an end to the war and the suffering in Gaza, and we need a plan for a just and lasting peace and security for both Palestinians and Israelis. So I think this comprehensive set of proposals that President Trump has set out is immensely important. We do need both Israel and Hamas to agree, and we need for them to understand the importance of this and really how much there is.
But isn't Netanyahu undermining it already? I mean, he's got a track record of literally blowing up peace processes.
So, of course, there's going to be a lot of noise around this, but I think there's been a huge amount of work to get us to this point. We've had both the proposals around from the work done by Arab states who've been very heavily involved in this. We've obviously the work being done by the US administration, and the work that we have done, that France and other countries have done, both in terms of now recognising a Palestinian state, but also putting forward proposals for a framework for peace. So all of these proposals have been going into this process to get us to this point.
Even though Israel,
I think this has to be an important moment, and we really need to make sure that this delivers.
I mean, all the likely leaders in Israel are sworn against a Palestinian state. Isn't Hamas going to be weighing that and saying they're not committed to this plan?
So I think there's going to be a series of phases in this. The proposals that President Trump has set out have been developed in a lot of detail, but we know, of course, there's going to be a further negotiation. But in the end, what I think Israel needs to recognise is there is no alternative to a two-state solution as a way to having security for Israel, for the state of Israel.
Doesn't accept that.
But it's in the end, there isn't a military solution that is going to work here. In order to have security and peace for Israel and for Israelis and Palestinians alike, that two-stage solution as the way in which is where we need to get to, in the end, is the only way to do this.
What is Tony Blair's proposed job here? I mean, is he the Viceroy of Gaza or what? I mean...
So President Trump has put forward these proposals, and what he has put forward is some proposals around having an international board that he would chair, and also, but there's also much more detailed proposals around having actually some administration run as a transition things to a Palestinian
authority. And would Tony Blair effectively be in charge of that?
No, that's not what's been proposed as part of this. But
no,
look,
the board.
No, President Trump has said he will chair the board.
But Trump's not going to be in the region, is he? I mean, on a day-to-day level, is the idea of naming Tony Blair that he's the guy who's really going to be running it day to day?
Well, no, this is a proposal that has been put forward by President Trump. Look, clearly we're expecting there to be other names put forward, including other leaders and former leaders as well, to be part of this oversight. But the key important thing in this is that Palestinians need to run Palestine. So the actual delivery of services in Gaza, in Palestine, those needs to be done by Palestinians. That is immensely important as part of this. And so there needs to be a transition as part of getting the ceasefire in place, but the core issues on the ground need to be done by Palestinians.
Do you think he's a good idea? I mean, he's a very controversial figure in the Middle East, as you know.
Well, look, this has been put forward by President Trump, and we're expecting a lot of different leaders and former leaders to be involved. Obviously, he is somebody who, with his experience both in the Northern Ireland peace process, but also as Middle East envoy, has been involved in a lot of these discussions over a long period of time. Okay. But I think that it would be a mistake to focus on one aspect of this when this is a much broader plan that has been put forward, and where there will need to be a series of further discussions, because it's really important that it has strong support from Arab states, from the Palestinian Authority, as well as part of the proposals around Israel and Hamas.
And is the government going to shift its position at all on weapons to Israel, on its dealings, its trade with Israel, given there's been a conference motion here backing the UN Commission saying Israel's committing genocide?
Well, as you know, we've already, very soon after the election, made big changes to the approach as a result of the work my predecessor David Lammy did, in order to restrict arms sales, in order to now lift proposals or suspend proposals for future trade negotiations, and also to introduce sanctions on Israeli ministers as well. You'll know that there are some of these issues that are a matter for international courts, but we have also recognised the devastating impact of what is happening in Gaza is why we have concluded that there is a risk of serious breaches of international humanitarian law, and that's why some of these big changes have been made.
Okay, let's turn to the big event today. Keir Starmer. I mean, if the choice is between decency and division, who are you aiming at? You know, is this an appeal to the centre of British politics? Exclude the left, exclude the right, do some deal with the Liberal Democrats and have some sort of progressive alliance against Farage?
Well, I think it's about the future of the country as a whole. You're right, it was set out, a very powerful speech, I think, from Keir Starmer, set out a vision of a choice between renewing the country based on decency, based on fairness, based on support for working people, as opposed to decline and as opposed to division, and an approach which has really been about shouting from the sidelines rather than having a positive vision for the country. But he also set out really practical things like gold standard apprenticeships, the need to boost vocational education, to give every young person, including in working class jobs that have often been disrespected, a better chance in life.
But if you don't move the dial, you're either wrong about Farage or you're wrong about the British people.
Well,
I mean, when are the polls going to shift, or when are you going to know that you're on the right track here?
Well, look, we've got to have a serious debate about the things that Nigel Farage and the Reform Party have been putting forward to the country. I mean, they're opposing employment rights for working people across the country. They repeatedly voted against employment rights for working people across the country. We're going to have an argument about that because actually we think that is wrong for the future of the country. So I'm not sure if you're kind of saying we should not be having an argument about the things that are important.
No, I'm saying if the polls don't shift next week, then you're either wrong about him or you're wrong about the people who support him.
I'm not quite sure the point you're making, Christian, because you seem to be saying that somehow we shouldn't stand up for their policies, their values, and we shouldn't debate them. Of course we should. Of course we should challenge a political party that, I've seen them doing stuff internationally where they just go across the world running Britain down, as opposed to flying the flag for Britain across the world, which is what we're doing to get new investment coming into Britain.
What about taking on the left, which Keir Starmer also did, and called supporters of a wealth tax snake oil merchants? I mean, Neil Kinnock, former leader, believes in a wealth tax. Is he a snake oil merchant?
Well, I think actually what Keir Starmer was saying is, look, we've got to be very practical about difficult choices and also make sure that our policies are deliverable. So we have a progressive vision for the country of greater fairness, of making sure, for example, other proposals we set out today about social care, a fair pay deal for social care workers who have been undervalued in Britain for far, far too long. Standing up for those social care workers, getting them fair pay. Those are the things we're going to stand for. What, of course, we can't do is then just say a whole series of things that aren't deliverable and don't stack up. So I think that's the point that Keir was making.
I mean, last week, Keir Starmer had this sort of progressive meeting where he had the leaders of Canada and Australia. Now, they have all succeeded in coming back from the brink by attacking Donald Trump and what he stands for. There was no mention of Donald Trump in the hall today because you can't attack him right now. I mean, you're not running against him, you're running from him.
Well, no, what we're doing is making sure that the UK-US relationship delivers for Britain. So the tech partnership that was agreed as part of the state visit is now, as a result, going to be delivering billions of pounds of investment in jobs in the UK. That is really important. The work that we have been doing internationally, actually on the Middle East piece, there were a lot of discussions about those issues with the US because we know there are things that only the US can do in terms of a peace process. Also, we've had discussions with them as part of NATO because we're part of a very strong alliance, and that really matters when we've seen NATO's eastern flank be having the incursions from Russian drones and Russian planes. So all of those things are really important. Of course, we will have issues where we differ and where we have a difference of view with the US administration and with President Trump, and those will be things we will talk about. But we will also need to work together to deliver for Britain.
Well, welcome back to Liverpool, where Keir Starmer has been on the podium addressing the Labour Party conference. To discuss how his speech went down, I'm joined now by Labour MP John McDonnell, who was Jeremy Corbyn's Shadow Chancellor when he ran the party, and he's been recently let back into the Parliamentary Labour Party after being suspended for voting against the party whip. And Matthew Doyle helped run Labour's PR machine when Tony Blair was PM. He became Downing Street Director of Communications for Keir Starmer after last year's election and left in March of this year. He is thus the longest serving of the four people who have had that role so far in the last 14 months.
It's longevity for you.
John McDonnell, you are apparently one of the snake oil merchants because you're in favour of a wealth tax.
I most probably am then, aren't I, really? If you look at my track record on the issues I've been in favour of since we've been elected, I did warn them about winter fuel allowance, and they had to change that. I warned them about disability benefits, they had to pull back on that. I warned them about the two-child limit, and I'm told this evening that they're going to reverse that in some form anyway. So maybe they should listen to some of us at some stage.
How long do you think you're going to stay in the Parliamentary Party?
My wife has bet me 8 hours, but I think I'll be there for a while.
So you're just ahead of that at the moment. I mean, Matthew Doyle, why pick a fight with the left when you don't you need to unite the left?
I think you saw a party today that is united in terms of this existential challenge that we face, which is the battle with reform that there is going to be at the next election. And what we have now is a Prime Minister who leaves here in a stronger position. We have a parliamentary party who I think will be encouraged by what they've heard today, because what I thought today's speech was the most coherent articulation from Keir of his personal story, his politics, and the policy that therefore will flow from it.
But John, if you're on the left of the Labour Party and you hear that mocking of the wealth tax, why wouldn't you just go and join Jeremy Corbyn?
Because on all of these issues, as I presented just now, we win the argument in the end, and I think we must probably win on this one. When we get to the time of the budget, there will be increases in tax, and I think actually Rachel Reeves will look at some forms of wealth, so we'll win the argument on that one, because I think it's almost inevitable, because if we're going to afford our public services, we're going to tackle poverty on the scale that we want, there has to be some redistribution of wealth, and that has to be through the next budget, if we're going to be effective and get really prepared for the next election.
Is he right?
I don't know what's going to be in the budget. We'll have to wait until November to find out. I think, though, we do have to recognise that one of the biggest challenges we've got, that this government would have, whoever it was led by, incidentally, is that we came into office with a debt-to-GDP ratio of 100%, compared with the 50% that Tony Blair and Gordon Brown had in 1997. And you cannot wish away the economic circumstances that there are. And for all this loose talk that there has been about bond markets and so on, The reality is we have the fiscal rules for a reason, and that's because they protect working people, because they protect the economy.
On the debt issue, that's why you don't go into any further debt. What you do is you redistribute wealth that we've got. So a fair taxation system would enable us to afford the policies that we want to pursue. And I tell you now, I'll predict it. In the budget, you will see increases in taxation. I think it'll edge towards wealth, but capital gains tax in particular, that will enable us to really fulfil the promises that we've given people.
Well, I'm confident that we will deliver the promises that we've given people, and that's why I think, as I say, ultimately, if you look at where we are a year into this government, let's not, get too downhearted. We are in a situation where interest rates have come down, waiting lists have come down, wages have gone up. The fundamentals are strong.
And you're
of where we
historically
are.
unpopular is the basic problem. Now, you've got a framework
I think,
to attack reform.
Yeah.
If the polls don't turn around, what does that tell you?
Look, John McDonnell will remember being in politics in the early 1980s when the SDP were at 50% and they never went on to get nothing like that at the next election. I'm not complacent about the challenge from reform, but I do think we should, as a party and a movement, have a bit more confidence actually in our own abilities and our own agency that we've got over the next few years to take on these arguments, to take on the debate that there is. And I think that's what you saw from here today.
The problem with the 80s comparison, I was there, and that led to almost 13 years of a Tory government. So the point that you made earlier, I think we are uniting, but we're trying, because I think it's a dangerous moment with regard to reform, and also some elements beyond reform as well.
Do you think this attack is the right way to do it, though?
I think
to make this a choice between decency and division?
No, I think what will convince people on the doorstep will be the change in their lives, the cost of living crisis, how we tackle that. So rather than just attack language, it's make sure we have the actions that really change people's lives.
And is it right to attack policies as racist?
I think so, yeah.
Backfire?
No, I think it is true, but you have to be careful about your language. I think it's less racist than xenophobic, and we should use that sort of language and explain it more clearly.
Ultimately, how much time has he bought himself before there's more leadership speculation?
Look, there is always
till May next year.
There is always
local
leadership.
elections.
There is always leadership speculation. So I don't think that's hardly a novel concept within politics. What matters is that have we seen today a clear agenda from the Prime Minister for how he wants to take the country forward? We have, and I think he should be given the sort of time and the space to get on and to do that. And we have already got a record to be proud of. We've got an agenda for the future, and we've now got a clear set of dividing lines. I think this is, has been a very successful day for the Prime Minister and for the party.
Do you think he lives to the election?
Talk is easy, actions have to follow. I know Keir. If we get to May next year, and I've worked with him, and we're still this far behind the polls, and we're on the edge of a crisis in the party, I know Keir will do what's in the best interest of the party and the country. And if that means standing down, he'll have that responsibility.
He didn't look like a man who was thinking about standing down.
No, but we're trying to ensure that we have time to turn things around. But if we don't follow rhetoric today is fine, talk is cheap. What we need to do is put in the policies in action that will start seeing on the doorstep people's lives changing.
But I do think
let me just finish. We've got time to do that between now and the May elections, but if we don't, then we are in crisis.
Matthew?
Of course, the May elections are incredibly important, but let's not forget, there is a whole term of the government to run as well. And when you look at some of the ambitious policies that you've seen set out this week, it is just unrealistic, John, to say that we are going to build new towns by next May. New towns are going to take a whole parliament to build.
Let me just explain.
I'm really
what you
sorry,
do
you
is
have to
long-term
explain
policy, but short-term hits as well.
And that's what we've done. Falling wages, falling interest rates.
Doyle and John McDonnell. Until next time.